Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to the TFT Perspective. Viewers, Turkey is on the forefront of almost every mainstream media organization since the fall of the Bashar al Assad regime. And there is a lot of fuss going on social media concerning Turkish new foreign policy and how quickly it has turned the table against the West or against its, I would say, adversaries in the last decade alone. We all remember that Turkey initially was very quiet when it came to the Syrian front, but it officially started its campaign in 2016, especially against PKK sponsored groups, the SDF, which were operating against Turkish interests in the region. And quickly afterwards, they also went on with the military solution against General Haftar inside Libya. An accord was signed between the officially recognized government of Libya and Turkey regarding maritime security. So, in order to have claims in the Mediterranean, the Libyans sided with the Turkish government, and Turkey proceeded in 2019 to launch a military crackdown against General Haftar and its operations in Libya. And as far as General Haftar is concerned, in Libya, it's being supported by France, by Western powers, including Russia as well. So there is a big, I would say, confusion when it comes to overall conflicts in the zone. We have adversaries in Syria, then allies in Libya, then adversaries in Somalia as well. Other than that, recently, just I would say a week back, Turkey initiated the peace agreement between the Ethiopians and Somalians. The tough situation between Ethiopia and Somalia began in January 2024, and this was about the recognition of the Somaliland issue between Somalia and Ethiopia. Ethiopia wants access to warm waters, especially in the Red Sea, and the only way it can get that is via Somalia or via Somaliland. So this is the context regarding this. Other than that, when it comes to Western powers, there is talk of this neo Ottomanism or reincarnation of Ottoman Empire, especially when it comes to Turkish military plans inside the region and its impact of foreign policy in the region as well. So if you actually draw the map and look the Turkish presence, especially boots on grounds, you can witness that there are around 30 to 40,000 troops since 1974 in Cyprus alone. Then you have approximately 10 to 15,000 in Syria. About 50,000 are stationed in different border posts and buffer zones in Iraq. And in Libya, there is reported that there are Turkish managed proxies that are operating inside that region. And Somalia in 2017, the Turkish military basically led a campaign against Al Shabaab as well as against ISIS fighters. Around 2,000 Turkish troops are operating in the region. And again, Turkey has bases in Albania, in Bosnia Herzegovina, as well as in Kosovo, and an Arab nation as well in Qatar. Around 3,000 and 5,000 troops are operating since 2015. These numbers come by a report of a Turkish study program, basically of how influential the Turkish military muscle is being used to basically build up their foreign policy in the region. So this entire aspect, especially now, since Mr. Fadan is visiting Syria currently, he was having coffee atop a mountain with the new, I would say, leader of Syria, Mr. Julani, or he's changed his name now to something else. So there are some news concerning Israel actually vacating the Golan Heights, especially the occupied regions inside Syria. And they're saying that Netanyahu himself has said that by the end of 2025 they would withdraw from there. But there are talks that by the start of 2025, Israel might withdraw from that region. Other than that, there are also news circulating about how the new Syrian government is predominantly dependent on Turkey when it comes to rebuilding its military infrastructure. This is exactly what the language was observed even during the presser between the Turkish foreign minister and the new Syrian leadership, that the defense industry as well as the recent infrastructure development and probably a base in Homs would be managed entirely by a Turkish military complex. Other than that, Turkish military exports have increased around 13 to 14% this year alone, and it's the first time that their domestic industry, especially when it comes to exports, has increased tremendously, and their imports, their dependability on weapons coming from Europe or from America has declined. So this is actually the first time after a very long time this has happened. So in order to discuss this issue about the so-called Ottomanism, we have with us Mr. Vakar Korvi. Sir, Turkish foreign minister visits Damascus. We also saw their intel chief actually praying in the Umayyad mosque as well. Um, do you think that the Turkey has ambitions to either rebuild that old Ottoman Empire, or now the, I would say, the not so sick man of Europe, because there are reports circulating on social media that this is exactly the plan of Mr. Erdogan and his party.
I think if you now reverse the trends, probably sick man of Europe is Europe itself now.
Mm-hmm.
Demographically, if you look at their economy, the way they are involved in Russia-Ukraine war, so there's a lot of, I think, agitation in the mind of European. We have friends and people are not very happy. We've seen the German economy going down, Italian economy, even the French, and rise of the far right. So definitely there are different trends. Now I'll start with what President Tayyip Erdogan mentioned recently. While addressing, he was distributing, I think, certificates to intellectuals in science, physical and social sciences. There was some forum that Turkey cannot be confined to its borders and must expand influence. So basically, he's talking of influence. Any, I think, developing nation or developed nation would like to expand its influence. So I think that should be very clear that it's matter of. Then, if you look at Turkish periphery at present, we are not going into Ottoman Empire's boundaries or erstwhile Ottoman Empire, because then we'll just throw light on that, how much area Ottoman Empire had under control. So it's on the crossroads of basically Europe and Asia. That's why it's called Asia Minor. And if you even look at Istanbul, is part is in Europe and part is in Asia. So it has a legacy from both the continents, and also confluence of I think 5 major civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
So you had the Orthodox, Byzantium of that time, when let's say Istanbul was Constantinople, and this used to be one of the superpowers. You also had influence of let's say Greco-Roman empires. Then if you look towards Central Asia and North, or further expand, was the actual Ottomans or the Turks, not the Ottomans but the Turkic people.
Mm-hmm.
So it has that historical and cultural linkages. Then with the Middle East, with Islam, and to some extent with even Iran or Persia.
Mm-hmm.
So all towards a confluence of five major civilizations. So it means the people who are living there, and we have traveled to Turkey. So it's always a pleasure to go and meet people. You will find people from different regions coming and working there, and there's a lot of movement of Turkic people. Even in Europe, you go to Germany, you have a huge diaspora. You go to some other countries, especially Eastern Europe, and even I think in Central Asia. So that is one. So that is the context that basically it has a civilizational historical legacy to defend and guard. And what happened after World War I and the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923, Turkey was denied a lot of leverage, even as a state. So I think then Ataturk had to agree with that and save Turkey, and all the I think I would say powers, the allies were hell bent on actually destroying it, whatever
Mm-hmm.
were left. So in that there were compromises, and then there was 100 years period of different things. Uh, when you go to Turkey, it is discussed in their coffee shops and tea houses that there were certain compulsions, especially on militarization of Black Sea or the Mediterranean. Although Turkey has already bases, control over Bosphorus in terms of international shipping, the things are going to change, even energy exploration. And then there is a subtle mention of maybe the old, let's say, as they basically call it in Europe, neo Ottomanism coming
Hmm.
back. But I would say that current dispensation is not really neo Ottomanism, but Turkey's genuine geostrategic reasoning based on the power that Turkey enjoys in terms of economic and military. It needs to now also expand its sphere of influence and also guard its border. Turkey is facing a serious threat. If you look at Syria and if you look at current dispensation, there's a very genuine threat from, as you mentioned, by PKK and YPG, and even we witnessed. Once we were there, there was a terrorist attack near
Hmm.
Ankara on one of the research centers. So it means that there is a general threat of terrorism. If the West thinks that Kurds and we are not against Kurds, but in case they can keep on, let's say it's not the Kurds, but let's say PKK or YPG attacking Turkey across the border, or let's say sending their agents to destabilize it, it will not be allowed. So mainly that's why I think there is a growth. Then also there is a vacuum in Syria after Bashar al-Assad. Even during times of Bashar al-Assad, it was divided into five, I think, regions we have discussed. Northeast was with the Kurds. Then you had Turkish enclaves for safeguarding their security. Then you had
I mean,
the
four different
HTS.
military operations were launched since 2016 by Turkey in
Exactly,
northern Syria,
northern
just
Syria.
because of the threats of
Exactly.
SDF
Then
and
you had a
ISIS.
US base and some of the their tribes who were with them. So already it was kind of balkanized, and now in case there's a government which is being supported by Turkey for general reasons, and they want to now, let's say, bring instability. And Turkey has to, I think, spend a lot of money, because when you're talking of rebuilding of infrastructure, resources,
Hmm.
bringing in some samples, like I think now they've appointed the police chief. They've started the municipal work has started in different cities, and there are like 3.5 million, 3.6 million Syrians in Turkey
Hmm.
as forced migrants because of war. They are going to come back, and then there's going to be migration coming from Europe again, passing through Turkey. So all told, I would say that this is any country would do it. But of course, there are certain signs related to growing influence. If you go to Africa, especially the Horn of Africa, because again, Turkey has worry about passage of its trade and commerce. You mentioned
Yes.
kind of exports they have,
Hmm.
even with South Asia and Far East or Europe. So from Eastern Mediterranean on one side, then you on the northern side you have Southern Black Sea, and then the Red Sea. They would like to safeguard, including Strait of Hormuz, because uh, Turkey may be having oil and gas interest here, and from Iraq I think they are already having some arrangement. They also want to open a corridor from Persian Gulf
They also
to
recently
Turkey.
signed a trade deal with Iran.
Exactly, and that's why I think more than $30 billion.
Yeah.
And somehow the people were trying to give Syria a sectarian angle, which is
Hmm.
not the case. It's pure, I would say, geopolitics. It's pure real politics.
Hmm.
So all told, I think uh, Turkey and for Pakistan, it's a very good relationship, and they also look at Pakistan as a peer, as a friend, and also look at collective, security of the region. And we've been collaborating, like in Azerbaijan. There's a commonality of interest. They've supported us on Kashmir, and India somehow remains, very worried. Even now, they see that this influence is growing in Syria and in the Red Sea. So there's a lot of talk in India also.
Yeah, there's also West is trying to spin up this issue as well. The new Trump administration wants to recognize Somaliland. Israel wants a military base there. Then you have alleged reports that some Arab nations are also influencing in the region, especially when it comes to the Horn of Africa. Likewise, every nation does, and in Libya as well. So there is a kind of a friction between Turks and Arabs in sense. That's what the Western media is trying to portray it as. Other than that, what we had witnessed that there were two kinds of narratives being thrown up. One was this neo-Ottomanism aspect, and another was the Great Turan aspect as well. Turkey wants to unite all the Turkic culture groups. So that was predominantly used by the Western media outlets, especially those who are propagating the so-called atheist attack that took place in Germany. There were Uzbek fighters, Tajik fighters, there were Afghans, Anybody which had Turkic roots were in Syria, and that's the reason why there were a lot of foreign fighters, and then ISIS comes to play in that nonsense as well. So. Uh, we know that Mr. Anthony Blinken did visit Turkey. It was a concern for the Americans, especially when they saw that now the main thing is over, but all the guns are now blazing against the PKK and YPG terrorist outlets. So, at the end of the day, if America does conclude that maybe we had supported them a lot, I'm pretty sure their senator, what was his name, John Kirby,
John
also
Kennedy.
Kennedy,
Yeah.
he spoke a lot about the Kurds, hands off Kurds, hands off Kurds. But this is not exactly what the Turkish government exactly wants. They want, I would say, no militias operating inside Syria that operate against the Turkish population, or especially in the Turkish Kurd regions as well. The reintegration of Syria of its territorial integrity is the prime importance right now. It's the only Americans, and I would say the Western media outlets that are coining this, that you need to give autonomy to this region. But what about the region as a whole? If the main objective was to get rid of Bashar al-Assad, why make I would say an aloof decision out of nowhere that now you have to divide the country as well?
Yeah, that's, I think, very, very unfortunate, because when you come to commonality of interest, let's say driving, because it's felt that Iranian influence or Hezbollah or even Russian influence has reduced considerably, and they're very happy, and even the maybe Israelis are happy. But when it comes to Kurds, because Syria should be recognized as a country as it existed, I think. And Kurds were very much part of the Syrian mainstream. It's only now, because if you look at Kurds, they are also spread over, I think
I would say
five.
4 or 5 countries.
Like
Yeah.
Turkey has a major population, and they are doing very well even in the parliament, and it's well developed area. South of Diyarbakir, then you have Gaziantep, and I think President Tayyip Erdogan also visited Gaziantep to communicate when Syria, there was a strategic change in Syria by the HTS. So it means that if Kurds exist within Syria, maybe they get more autonomy. But now they've named this area as Rojava or something like this. So it start impacting the Turkish Kurdish areas, the Iranian Kurdish areas, and the Iraqi Kurdish areas. Already northern Iraq is, I think, quite autonomous in that sense that there's a lot of presence of Western powers. Even there are reports of Israelis being there. So then it starts threatening actually 4 countries, but they can exist, and that has been precisely, Turkey is not against Kurds as such. And when John Kennedy said leave the Kurds, so it means that probably he was not trying to basically check President Tayyip Erdogan, but not disturbing the status quo. Status quo is that keep on keep prodding in those 4 or 5 countries, and then destabilize them. Israel can have their
The
bases.
main issue is also about those oil wells in the north.
Exactly.
That's mostly controlled by US companies.
Yes, and there's a huge, I think, potential. It's I think presence of oil and gas. So now coming to Turkey's cultural, I would say, influence, which is important. When you mentioned the Turan, or let's say the old connection with the, because if you look at Turkic people, they originated from actually almost Eastern, if you look at the map, Eastern Russian Federation.
Mhm.
So extreme east and south. And then, of course, we have all those warriors like Genghis Khan and others, his sons. And then having the Khanates, even Crimea was part of the Khanates. So in Turkey is done is they're trying to connect with all those Turkish speaking people. Like you have their cultural interchange, exchange with Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, even Uzbekistan, and then again Azerbaijan, because again there is commonality, despite that Azerbaijan is mostly Shia,
Mhm.
but they have very good relationship, and there Pakistan, Turkey, and Azerbaijan have acted together, especially
Over the Nagorno-Karabakh issue
Karabakh
against
issue.
Armenia.
Yeah, Nagorno-Karabakh issue. That's where now India comes in. They're trying to now arm the Armenians and communicating it to Turks. So one is that cultural, and if you look at their, I think revival of culture and history, it is very interesting, especially in last I think 30 years by the AKP party, that there should be revival of history, and this is, I think, important for any nation.
Yeah.
Even here in Pakistan, you talk of history, there's a lot of criticism by the liberal left, but Turkey, you have liberal left, and we've been there interacting with their academy, and there's a lot of emphasis on history and culture. So yeah, I will just mention one, TV serial or you can season, Artugrul Ghazi, which was I think the most, and I think the actor himself mentioned that Pakistan was one of those countries where I actually had lot of praise, and this was one reason that I am very famous.
Mhm.
It's not because of Turkey actually. So that means the cultural strength of the history and the way it is presented. And then there is a series. So it means that they would like their next generation to be connected and learn about, and other peoples also learn about. Even if you look at, let's say, subcontinent or South Asia,
Mhm.
especially Indus Valley, and Professor Hassan Dani, who was an, I would say, top anthropologist in Pakistan, he basically mentioned that 60% bloodline of people of Pakistan is basically Central Asian, or indirectly, you can say it's basically Turkish. So it means that there is an influence. Even Mughal Empire was a kind of product of
Product of
Turco-Mongols.
Turco-Mongols. Yeah.
So I think they have a glorious history. And if you look at the development now, you'll be surprised that in Europe, I think more than 30 to 40% of spare parts for the cars are manufactured in Turkey.
Mhm.
Like BMW and I think
It's a
Mercedes
1.5 trillion dollars economy.
Economy.
And it's
Yeah,
one of the biggest economies. This is where my last question comes into play as well. When you talk about culture and history, isn't this a very absurd notion that usually comes from Western powers, especially America, talking about neo-Ottomanism and these things? But when it comes to their own culture, the British imperial colonialism, and that they're all okay with that as long as they have their history. It was all hunky-dory, all goodwill and everything like that. Like for instance, a lot of Italians tend to revisit their Roman roots before, and that they had a massive empire. So why is it that when it comes to Turkey, they say no, you are doing this for something else, but when it comes to their own cultures, this is something else then?
I think this is pure hypocrisy. I would actually like the audience to watch History Channel.
Mhm.
Now look at the themes. So basically, it's Greco-Roman period, and then and all the heroes are from that time. Then there is a dark age
Mhm.
of the Muslims, Ottoman rule, or even I think Mughal Empire, and then there is modern history starting from, let's say, 18th century, because basically Islamic Empire was then crumbling, and the West was colonizing, and even the colonies were projected as something, like in India there is a general perception, South Asia, that Gora Sahab did wonderful things, and he's the one
He
who
made
brought railway.
railways,
Yeah,
brought in an education system,
yeah.
left our GDP from like around 30% to 3% as well
Of the global
of
GDP.
the global GDP.
So I would actually want our own people in Pakistan also to actually read Shashi Tharoor's book, Inglorious Empire.
Raj, English Empire.
Inglorious Empire, and that very clearly mentions that in times of Mughals, again, I would say an offshoot of the Turks.
He mentions that not on the time of Mughals, but like at the decline of
At the
Mughals.
decline of Mughal Empire, it
Yeah.
was 26 to 27% of global GDP,
Mhm.
and even US today doesn't have it. So it means it's one of the strongest. That's why everybody came here running.
Mhm.
So it means same is true for Ottoman Empire. We look at, I think, their influence, and if you look at their management system, there are traveler stories passing through Ottoman land, very very peaceful, and they developed all the areas. Levant, even if you look at Palestine, the way it was managed, then you have a part of Africa, North Africa, right up
The
to
most of their, I would say, contribution actually came from the Janissaries. That they were non-Muslim. They
Yeah.
were Christians and Serbs and Greeks and Albanians and Bosnians actually.
and even in science and technology, because generally there is stereotyping about Muslim empire that was all done through. I've been to Istanbul and visited some of their museums, science and I think history museum, and it's very interesting to find the kind of science and technology development,
Mhm.
and they have actually museum of all the Islamic. Like one of the I think oldest universities was not in Europe, but in Fez of Morocco, and then of course Istanbul University itself, is almost, it takes its roots somewhere in 15th century. So and then they established, these institutions of management schools, science and technology, like even appointment of Amirul Bahar,
Admiral.
which was then they removed the,
D.
Amirul added a D, I think the Spanish or the Portuguese, and became Admiral. This is, and I've seen Kharuddin Barbarossa's statue there. Travel to old Istanbul, you'll find him with the periscope, and he was, I think, one of the first admirals officially appointed, and he dominated the Mediterranean and the other seas like anything. So it means that in all the fields they had, and they probably deserve it. Good thing is, what can we learn from it? But if you look at Turkey 40 years back, I think they had similar problem like we had.
Mhm.
You had maybe mismanagement,
There was
poor
a
administration, corruption.
huge, I would say, conflict between military and civilians as well
Yes.
over power.
So they have actually come out of it, but doesn't mean that they have, let's say, they didn't develop a strong military. Look at their export. Look
They
at the
have.
drone technology in all the fields. Then probably air warfare, maritime warfare, and then of course they do promote their people who are with the national security, like Hakan Fidan himself has been an ex-in-chief, and he's now the let's say foreign minister. Tomorrow he may have some very important assignment. So they have groomed their, I think, leadership also. And interestingly, I mentioned that Honorable President Tayyip Erdogan himself is product of a madrasa
Yeah.
from the Hatip Imam systems.
Mhm.
So why can't we do it? So I think that's where we must learn. The one, in terms of history, culture, and science and technology, they have been, I think, a nation to reckon with. And if they are growing their influence, we should learn from it.
Yeah. So let's see how things unfold when it comes to Turkey or these absurd terms of Neo Ottomanism. That's it for today, folks. Thank you so much for watching us. Please do leave a like and subscribe. Bye bye.